as I was walking up these stairs, this gentleman said, pay attention to what happens. So as I put my foot on each stair, they lit up in millions and millions of tiny little stars, every single one, all the way up. It was totally amazing and just incredible. It's like when I tell people this story, that's one thing, right? However, being there and having this happen is absolutely spectacular, just amazing. So I got up to the top, to the landing, and the building was maybe 200 feet tall, by half a mile long. I mean, this thing is huge. There was a big archway in the front, and he asked me to enter. So I entered the building with him, and the next surprise came.
I'm here today with Adam Miller, and Adam has had 3 death experiences that he has come to share with us today. Adam, thank you so much for being my guest. I'm really honored to have you.
You're so very welcome, Tia. I'm really happy to be here.
And so tell me about these 3 death experiences. You don't consider them near death, you actually died.
I actually was flatline on the table 3 times.
Wow. What
Yeah.
happened?
So let's go back a little bit. When I was younger, I was born in 59. All right. And through my young childhood, my father beat me every single day. And I ended up in the hospital 31 times from those beatings. I think that was the beginning of some of the trauma that created the later death experiences. A lot of times when somebody abuses you like that, you don't take very good care of yourself. So, as I started to grow up, I grew up as a figure skater. I don't know if you're aware of that.
No, I
Uh,
wasn't aware of that.
yeah, so I started figure skating when I was 2 years old, and I went up through the ranks of figure skating, up through the junior men level. And as I was figure skating, it was very, very physically demanding. I only went to school part of the time, all the way up through high school. So I want to start with something that happened to me, and it became really relevant later. So I told you had been beaten really bad. And then I had a girlfriend when I was about 15, and her name was Crystal, and we went to this party. And at the party, everything seemed fine, seemed okay. And she came out from the bedroom, and she was sitting with me, and we were just talking. And all of a sudden, she became limp. And what I didn't know about her is that she had taken an entire bottle of barbiturates. So as I was talking to her, she actually died in my arms. So that was my first experience with any kind of death, things that had to do with this life here and what happens after it. So it actually took them, I believe, 3.5 hours to get me to let go of this girl. I was actually hanging on to her so tight that they couldn't get me to let go of her. So when you're a child like that and a trauma thing happens to you unexpectedly, you're not really sure what to do with it. You know what I mean? You freeze. And so I froze. So that's probably all I'm going to say about that. But it definitely does have to do with later things. So I often thought about this girl throughout my life. By the way, I had seen her off and on in various dreams and intuitional sort of feelings like she was there for especially the first few years after that event. So later in my life, I'm figure skating and everything's going good, right? So I'm learning the triple jumps and all that stuff you see on TV. Uh, I was able to do pretty much of it. I mean, we're talking late 60s, 1970s, you know what I mean? That sort of era of skaters. And I was doing pretty well. And I was training down in Los Angeles. So I was 18 years old, 1977, and I started to feel weak, and I started to have, you know, some pretty heavy duty lung issues. It turned out later that I was kind of prone toward that. I didn't know that at the time. So I'll never forget it. I went up to do this jump, and the world went black. So I woke up in the hospital, and there were doctors standing over me, and they said, "Well, you have double pneumonia." And so I was very shocked at that and extremely surprised. People have to understand that figure skaters are like a piece of tungsten steel. We don't feel pain. We don't acknowledge any kind of pain whatsoever. Here's a good example. So, one time I was skating in a show and I broke my ankle. So, you know what I did with it? I actually went backstage and duct taped the bones together, and I actually put my feet back in the skates and finished the number. Yeah, so there's a really good example of ignoring pain. And see, that's the issue right there. A lot of people out there, when they see red flags with their health or whatever happens to them, they thoroughly ignore it. And that's the issue. So, as I was saying, I was in the hospital there, and the doctor said, "Well, your fever's about 105, and both of your lungs are filled up with blood and pus, and you're breathing at about 15% of your lung capacity." So, what happens next is thoroughly amazing, right? So, when I tell this, listen, I've been telling this story for like 40 plus years, right? And I enjoy telling the story. However, when I tell the story, it does take me back to all that illness and sickness. Hey, I want everybody to understand out there that although a death experience may be a fantastic thing to experience, it's the getting there that's really, really rough. Okay. And I want people to get that. So, back to my story. Um, what they did is they put me in a vat of ice, my entire body. Now, this is 1977. So they had I mean, they don't do any of those kind of methods now to you. So they no longer do that. And this is the reason. The reason they no longer do that is because when they put you in the ice, yes, your temperature drops. However, when they take you out, guess what happens? Well, what happens is it can skyrocket. So they took me out of the ice and my temperature just went crazy. It went up to 109. At that point, they say I flatlined. Now, I just wanted everybody to understand that I was completely flatlined. There was no heartbeat. So it's not like the story I'm going to tell you is out of some sort of illusion or delusions. I was actually dead. So I want everybody to really get that. Um, and the next thing that happened is there was a guy standing there. Okay, and there was no tunnel. There was none of the things that other people talk about. With me, there was just this guy. So the guy said, "Do you know where you are?" And I said, "Well, actually, I have no clue." I did not know I was dead at that point. I still felt like myself. I just realized that I wasn't in the hospital any longer. So that's about the extent of what I knew. And he said, "Well, what we'd like to do is we would like to take you to a building." So we went to this building, but I want to talk about something that happened as we were walking uh, up these stairs. Pretty amazing. So the building had maybe 70 some odd stairs. And, as I was walking up these stairs, this gentleman said, "Pay attention to what happens." So as I put my foot on each stair, they lit up in millions and millions of tiny little stars, every single one, all the way up. It was totally amazing and just incredible. It's like when I tell people this story, that's one thing, right? However, being there and having this happen is absolutely spectacular. Just amazing. So I got up to the top, to the landing, and the building was maybe 200 feet tall, by half a mile long. I mean, this thing is huge. There was a big archway in the front, and he asked me to enter. So I entered the building with him, and the next surprise came. When I tell this thing, it's like, did that really happen? In entering, the entire building was full of angels. So just like the angels you would picture in your head. Now, there was several different kinds of angels. So there was the really, really tiny little angels that you might call sprites or whatever. And they were everywhere dancing and flying. It was just totally amazing. Um, then there were the bigger angels. I learned that those are called seraphim angels. Are you familiar with those?
I've heard of seraphim.
Yeah, so the seraphim angels are about the size of us, about the size of regular humans, I would say. They're really interesting because each one of these seraphim, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of these in there, just so we kind of keep that in perspective. Each one had a different color to their wings, right? So they had full wings, like you would think of them, and they each had a lovely color. And according to their color, um, what the color meant was their um, their abilities, right? So each one had different types of abilities in the universe, and they would follow those abilities exactly. Now, there's another kind of angel, which I'm pretty sure you're familiar with, and those are the archangels. Yes, you know those?
Oh, absolutely.
Ah, so they were guarding the four corners of the building. All right. And each one was probably, I'm guessing, 150 feet tall, each one. And that was their job, to guard the building. Uh, they had a sword, they had a shield. I'm pretty sure you get the picture of that, right? I mean, they are the guardians of our universe, big time. So this gentleman said, well, we need to go to the far end of the building. So I finally got there. That took about 20 minutes. This is how big this is, right? Huge. And I get there, and there is a podium. And behind the podium, there were entities that are probably familiar to you. I'm not exactly sure what your spiritual education is. So let's kind of go with it. So behind this podium, there was a lovely lady, and her name was Mary. Yeah, you know her?
I've heard of Mary too.
Right. So Mary, and then there was another one called Kuan Yin. Do you know that one?
I don't think, no, I've not
Yeah.
heard of that.
So Kuan Yin is kind of the female incarnation, like Buddha, the great Buddha law. By the way, I'm a Buddhist. Forgot to mention that. And then there was Buddha. Buddha was there. And then there was a guy named Saint Germain. Do you know who that is?
I've heard of Saint Germain.
Yes, and then there were many others that would take me an hour to describe. So as I walked up to this podium, they told me that who they were was the spiritual council, if that makes sense. They told me that the reason I was there was because I was in kind of a limbo state. They explained that the building is called the place of change. And the place of change is where all humans, either entering or exiting a body, they actually come there. They also explained to me that each one of us, before we come into a lifetime on the earth, that we actually write an agreement. Have you heard of this?
I've heard of that. Is that like the soul contract?
I believe that's another terminology for it. And what was really interesting is, so they got out this, it was in my experience, it was a book. Okay. So they got out this giant book, and they laid it on the podium. They asked me to approach, and they asked me to start reading it. Well, the beginning of the book says that it's by Adam Miller, and that was a shock. I was like, oh, okay. And they explained that I had written it. that was my agreement that I had written before I went to the earth. So in other words, while you're in the spirit form, you actually write this book in the place of change before the Holy Council and decide basically what you're going to do when you come down here. Okay. So I went down through it and I realized I'd only written it up to 18 years old. That was a shock because we have to keep in mind 1977, I was 18. So I looked up at them and I went, okay, now what? And they said, well, here's the thing. In order for you to go back, you need to continue writing what you'd like to do. So they asked me a lot of questions about that. Why did I want to go back? What was my purpose for that? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They said, well, so here's the deal. We're going to give you a few choices. It's kind of like, door number 1, 2, and 3, that kind of that kind of thing. I expected Vanna White to walk out in a minute. And they said, well, one of the great choices you might want to make is you go to the Universal College. I was like, wow, there's a school? They said, yeah, there's a school you can go to. So thought about that for a while. Long story short, I went to the school. Yeah, I went to the college. Now, the interesting thing about the college is that the college is taught by special folks, let's say, and they all have wings, if you get my point. However, they are not angelic hosts. They are instructors only. That's the only job they do. Now, in the classroom, it pretty much had a college format like we know college here. And there was over 1 million souls at that school in that course that day. So there is a lot going on at this school. So I spent 2 weeks at this college and I actually got a graduation certificate. Okay. For going.
For 2 weeks?
2 weeks. I went for 2 weeks and I graduated from all those courses. Those courses ended up being, a big factor in my later work. So I came back to the building and the place of change and the Holy Council, and they said, it's time to go back. So basically, I woke up in the hospital room after this. Now, of course, I'm giving you the short version of all this, right? So in the book, The Least Likely Healer goes through that whole entire experience, which you and I don't have time for today. So I woke up in the hospital and not much happened for a few days. By the way, I actually got well from that. I walked out of the hospital in about a week.
Oh, wow.
Which was absolutely unheard of. No one has ever recovered from the type of pneumonia that I had. And to this day, both lungs are completely scarred. When you look at either an MRI or a X-ray or a CAT scan, it pretty much looks like the surface of the moon in there. That's how much scarring I have from it. I should not have lived on any level. Okay, so I'm in the hospital, right? And a few days go by, and I'm thinking about this whole thing. Can you imagine what this was like for an 18-year-old child to go from just an earthly experience of being a skating god? I was such an egotistical little brat. You wouldn't have believed it. Anyway, and that, when the universe calls on you, it's time to wake up. And that's what I want to tell people. When the universe calls and says what you thought of as just being one dimensional, that ain't it. This situation that we're in right here, right now, is only temporary. And it's very, very limited. Very limited. That experience that we have on a daily basis is nothing but an illusion. That's all it is. Extremely temporary. So to go back to that story, it was about 4 or 5 days later, okay? And the guy that we're talking about was standing at the foot of my bed at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, oh, because this time when this same fellow came, he was about 6 feet tall, sort of a golden beard, some kind of robe, I think. It's kind of, when you see these individuals, they're not human. You know what I mean? They don't have what we think of as a human appearance, anything but that. And it had a massive glow of this sort of gold color. And so he looks at me, crosses his arms, and he says, "Now, from your death experience, there's a few things I need to tell you. And one of those is this, that from this day forward, you will not have a veil." And what that means is that most humans have a veil between this experience and the spiritual realm. I don't have one. So he said that I would see him and feel him and many, many others throughout the rest of my lifetime. And of course, I'm still ill and I'm still kind of laying in the bed and I'm like going, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I had no idea what he was meaning. So, and he said, "Oh, by the way, I just needed to tell you that a lot of people call me Jesus, the Christ, etc." So, that's a little shocking. And then he disappeared. So after the death experience, I went in the Holiday on Ice figure skating show. Have you ever heard of that one?
I've heard of it. Yes, I've never seen it though.
Well, you're just missing something
I
here.
am missing out.
So the show that I wanted to go in was in Europe. And so I joined that show. I was in Zurich, Switzerland. And this was 1980, I want to say. It was a while. It took me a few years to recover from that double pneumonia because I was only able to breathe so well. And I could no longer compete. So I could only do it professionally, and that was about it. I just couldn't do the rigors of, 10, 12, sometimes 15 hours a day, 6 days a week, which is what I did from 2 years old to 18. That was my schedule. And then I very rarely saw school or any of that stuff. I was on the rink all the time. So I went to the Holiday on Ice in Europe, and when I got there, it was awesome. It was a great show. I really enjoyed myself, and I met a girlfriend there who was in the show, a really really nice Swiss young lady, and she broke her ankle in the show. Now, for the years that I told you, between 77 and about 80, I think it was 79 actually. I don't know. I'm getting so old I can't remember anything. Uh, and she broke her ankle, uh, and I hadn't really seen a lot of really anything between 77 and 79. Let's say I didn't really see much, just so everybody understands that. I just went back to being, whatever the heck normal is. Do you even know what normal is to you? I
What is,
don't.
I don't think there is a normal.
No, especially when you get weirdos like me. Okay. So so she breaks her ankle. We're sitting in the hotel there, and all of a sudden I start seeing color, and not color like a rainbow, but just flashes of color is a better explanation. And I just grabbed a hold of this girl's ankle. Even she jumped. We were both kind of shocked by this. And this maybe lasted a few seconds. And I just felt this whole loving compassion, warmth come over. And she stood up on it. And she was skating the next day. Now, that doesn't mean that it healed the bone or whatever. What it actually means is that it started the process of healing it. And she did really well in the show. Yeah. So I would say was my first experience of any kind of work. So I need to say something about the work, right? Because I know you're going to go there. Um, Let me explain this to you. So when I do work with people, I don't do that work. I do not believe that human men and women are capable of that. The heavens belong to the heavens and the earth belongs to men and women. That's how I feel. And what that means is that when I work on any kind of illness with people, I'm not doing that. Holiness does that work. And that's the pure energy that creates a cellular difference in any kind of, disease or injury. So do you understand? Do you understand that?
Yes, I do understand that. But what happened, after you did this to her ankle? What were you thinking?
And I think that is a super important question. And the reason it is because what people need to understand about me is I don't think. Okay. I'm not in the way. I get completely out of the way. Even though I am present in the room, holiness works on its own volition, and I'm just a witness to it.
Hmm.
So that's basically my philosophy with how I work. My work is very, very different in the world. So after that experience, I was in the show for maybe 5 or 6 years more, and not a lot happened. So by about 1991, I want to say, I had gotten out of that show, and then I was teaching skating. And all of a sudden, I started seeing the folks that we're talking about. So I started seeing Buddha, Kuan Yin, Mary, many, many of the angels, Gabriel, Michael, and so on and so forth. And through the years, what ended up happening is these individuals became my instructors. So I think it's important to say that between about 1990 and now, uh, I listen and can hear them 24/7. So it's all the time. And depending on what's going on of importance, for instance, here's a good example. So on Saturday morning, Eve and I actually have a morning meeting on Saturday with Holiness. And then what she will do is she actually writes down, everything they say, which is pertinent to, our lives, other people's lives, my clients' lives, and so on and so forth. And, we had asked a few questions about you and so on. So, um, one of the things that I'm getting as I'm sitting here is that you are important in the world. You actually have a really important a job. And as an orator, you're very good at it. And you're very compassionate, very kind, and careful. You're also extremely careful who you get on there. Because, there's a lot of people who are fakes. There's a lot of people who are this and that and whatever. So, it's really important to do a lot of vetting, when you have people on for sure. And I feel like I think my work is, having a whole new direction because of the book and because I'm talking about 3 death experiences, which I never have publicly until right now, by the way. I've only talked about the first one you and I talked about just now. So if you'd like, I can skip a little bit and we can talk about the second one.
Well, yes, I do want to do that, but I have a quick question about you said Saturday morning you have a
Yes.
meeting, and with who? Who is this meeting with?
Okay, so the Saturday morning meetings are with Holiness. So sometimes it's Saint Germain, sometimes it's a guy called Serapis Bey, sometimes it's with Michael, Kuan Yin, Buddha, Mary. I don't really know who's going to come in on those meetings. They just do.
And is it like a channeling or is it like a telepathic communication? How does that work?
I'm not telepathic at all. I'm not psychic at all. So what happens with me, like I mentioned, is that there's no veil.
Hmm.
So my communication with these individuals is 24/7. However, if I have pertinent questions about a specific thing, then they will answer those questions specifically.
Hmm. And it's just like you're having a conversation with someone.
Yeah, I'm having them with him now as we're talking.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so my wife is like, how many people are in there, Adam? Because I get a little confused. All right, she's not quite sure who we're talking to here. And you know, I think the other thing I want to say is that I am a very, very straight-laced individual. I'm not what I would call wowie zowie. I don't know if you know what that means. But I'm not hippie. I'm not, to give a good example, I'm very conservative, I would say. So in my mannerism, and here's a good example. I'm a car guy, right? So um, I like muscle cars. I've had Camaro, Chevelle, etc. I have a Dodge Challenger right now, things like that. So I'm just a regular person, and I want people to understand that. All right, that I'm not out there at all in any other fashion. People that meet me, here's the reaction that people have. All right, so people that have never seen me or don't know anything about me, but they have a physical illness and they want to come and do a session. The first thing that happens is they walk in the room, they look at Eve, and they go, "Is that him? Is that the healer or whatever label?" Because they're always surprised about it. I don't know what they're expecting. Maybe they're expecting a guy named Zot or something. I'm not sure. Okay.
Uh,
Uh, I'm none of those things. I have terrible language and stuff like that. I'm just being good boy today. So, because my wife's like, now you have to be nice to her. Okay. So I try to stay really regular. A lot of people in the world have death experiences, which you very well know this. And I think everybody has a definition of what they think that means to them. And the reason I'm writing the book is so that we can kind of like break down some of that and, explain what happens basically and why it happens. And basically, people have death experiences because, like I said earlier, they don't take care of themselves. They just don't. So I'm on this podium these days, preaching, hey, take care of yourself, take care of your body, take care of your spirit. Don't do things that are abusive. Don't do alcohol. Don't do drugs. Don't do crazy stuff. When I was younger, back to the work, because I know you want to talk about that. I used to do between 14 and 17 clients a day. And I worked a 15-hour day, and I worked 6 and 7 days a week for about 35 years. So I don't really know, the count of individuals that we helped, but I do know that it's in probably that 40,000 person level. Not really sure. I also did group things in which, and these were really interesting, right? So we can talk about this a little bit. I did these for about 20 years, which we would have groups of only my clients. The public was never invited to these things because they're intense, in which I would sit in front of a group and holiness would actually come and talk to them. So those were, I mean, you can call them channelings, you can call them messenger, you know what I mean? There's a lot of names for that. And I would just call them, I don't know, it's the event. Why don't you come and do the event and let's see what happens? And what's really interesting is a lot of times when I did group things, people would actually heal themselves of things walking out the door. I never touched them. I never got anywhere near them more than 20 feet because I was on a stage. And yet they would walk out with whatever was going on and they themselves would fix it. And I was always amazed by those results, just absolutely amazing. Some of those events were maybe 200 people, I'd say. That's probably the biggest ones I ever did. And a lot of them I did. My office was in Lake Tahoe, by the way. So I was working on the West Coast there. And it was always beautiful. I don't know if you know anything about Lake Tahoe, but it's really beautiful there. And it's a fantastic place to work.
Adam, I lost your video. We'll continue. Moving on, I want to make sure that we touch on, or that we get to hear about your other two near-death experiences, especially because you haven't really spoken about them yet. So tell me what happened with your second near-death experience.
So, and that was in the 90s, and I was married to an individual, and it was a terrible marriage, and I was a very unhappy camper, and I think because of that, things began to fall apart, and I was taking a couch down the stairs. We were moving some furniture, and about halfway down those stairs, I just went black totally. Uh, so what ended up happening is I went down the stairs with the couch, and when I got to the bottom of the stairs, my head hit the wall, and then the couch hit my face. So then I was, completely out of it, not knowing anything. And the ambulance came to get me, and this was in Walnut Creek, California. And again, in the hospital, and then when I uh, came to my consciousness there, um, doctor explained to me that it was not because of the fall that I was unconscious. It turned out that I had an appendix that was about the size of a baseball. So it burst and created um, peritonitis. Do you know what that is?
Um, Tell me, refresh my memory.
Yeah, so peritonitis is blood poisoning. So when your appendix bursts, it just sends poison blood everywhere. So I had it throughout the entire body. And they wheeled me in on emergency. And again, I flatlined again. So back out into the universe, right? This time, uh, same guy I told you about before was waiting. Except this time he had his arms crossed and a rather unhappy look on his face there. And he said, "Well, you're not paying attention, and you're going to have to change a lot of focus, and you'll have to leave the marriage you're in for one thing, because your current wife, she's totally okay, but there are a tremendous amount of evil people around her. So um, same sort of place, um, and we talked a lot about what I needed to do. Now, between the 80s and 90s, I was working on clients, but I wasn't doing that full time because I was still teaching skating. So it was kind of a part time job, if you know what I mean. And so after this conversation with him, um, back into the hospital I went, and I spent about maybe 2 weeks with my entire stomach totally open, and they were draining all of the poisonous blood out, and that took many, many days to do, and an incredibly miserable experience after it. The other thing I want to say that people need to understand is that when you go out into the universe, uh, that part is really, really totally amazing. However, when you start to come back into the body, this is something that's really important. When you start to come back into the body, that is like a Mack truck hitting you. When you slam from being in your spirit to back in a dense body, it's very, very, very intense. Really, really rough on you. So, I can't say this enough about these things. As much as death experiences as a whole, when you're out there, are truly amazing, It's the getting out and definitely the coming back that is not happy. So, you really need to keep this in mind, everybody, because what happened with my clients later in my life is they were all like, well, I want to have a death experience. And I'm like, no, you don't. You do not want to have a death experience.
Do you think people have them as like a wake up call? Like, you've got to change some things.
Well, I remember when I was telling you, yeah, I remember that second one. So Jesus was waiting for me with his arms crossed, remember? And the reason he was pissed at me, right? Because I'd gotten in a bad marriage. I got all sideways. I was not paying attention to what I should be doing. And I ended up dead again because I wasn't paying attention. Wasn't paying attention. So you got to really think about what you're doing in your life because your body is very fragile. And, because it's like that, people have a tendency to focus on the world from the outside in. You know what I mean to you? And you cannot learn anything that way. You have to learn how to be spiritual from the inside out. That's the only way you're going to learn anything permanent. The only way. And one of the things that I learned by these experiences is that you take nothing with you, right? You take nothing with you from this planet. That's all man made. It has nothing to do with what happens to you later. Nothing. The only thing you take with you is what you learned. You don't take anything else. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So after that second one, I started really paying attention. Okay. And I went, okay, what are we doing? What I got and what I heard was, okay, it's time to like let your skating go and focus on what's important. So I started taking clients on. Now, back in those years, we didn't have all this computer stuff. So I was thinking to myself, okay, well, how do I get out there? And so I started going to these health fairs. Do you know what those are?
I don't, I think, health fair is like, a place you can go and walk around and see all these things for your health.
Yes, that's
Okay.
exactly right.
Okay.
It's kind of self-explanatory, right? So what happens is you have a booth and you say whatever it is you're doing in regards to either mainstream health or alternative health care. And obviously, I was in the alternative healthcare part, and I was just giving cards out all day. So pretty soon, I had about 120 clients in about a week. Yeah, and they started hearing, wow, this it probably works. And I was doing like little demonstrations of what it is. So I would have people actually just walk behind um, the booth sign. And I have the way my work works, because I know we're coming to that, right? So the way it works is somebody signs up for a session, they come to the session, we talk about what's going on with them. Once that happens, then I just sit them down on a massage table, and Holiness will actually come and tell me every single thing that's wrong with them in about 30 seconds. So then I'll just go down through whatever those issues are and ask them what they want to work on. And then we start working on it. How does that work? Well, basically, what I do is I just barely touch, slightly, and that energy field actually comes down through that person and changes the cellular structure of an injury or a disease. Now, if people have spiritual issues, then we don't do any of that, and we break all that down and we talk about things and what's going on and how they got there and how we can repair it. So I have a lot of education in psychology, by the way. So that's basically how the work works.
That's interesting. Is that kind of like what Edgar Casey was doing? Because he would be able to go into a trance and be able to figure out or hear, I guess, or everything that was wrong with the person.
I would say that it's similar.
Yeah, that's
I would say that I've always been really, really fascinated by him because I believe he was hearing holiness a lot. And he was obviously extremely good. It was my understanding that he had over 3 million patients, by the way.
I didn't know that.
So population of the world at that time wasn't that much. So really he was seeing everybody. I mean, people would fly from everywhere, drive from everywhere. They were like trying to give him, like a Duesenberg and stuff for payment. I mean, he had people from all over the world. So, um, fascinating as he truly is. I
Mm-hmm.
really admire him, by the way.
Yeah, I do
So
as well.
I guess we want to go to that third one, right?
Yeah, let's go there.
So I was working along, and the only reason that I had the third one is because, like I told you, I was doing between 15 and 17 people a day, and I would say I was just overworked. That's all. I don't think there was anything else really going on because I've been married to Eve for 15 years now, and so she's been witnessing this work for that period of time. And she kept telling me, though, this was about 4 years ago. She kept saying, "Yeah, you look tired, you look worn out, you're doing too much, you're seeing too many people," and that kind of thing. Not because the energy work wore me out. It did the opposite. I'd be up all night long because I was so, uplifted by it. So I didn't get worn out from that. I just worked too many days and too many hours. I'm sure you know this for yourself. If you overdo it, that's what happens. So we were in Reno, Nevada, I believe, at that time, and basically what happened was it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was walking down the hallway, and well, I hit the floor face first. Isn't that happy? And they drugged me down to the hospital there. Here we go again, right? And I couldn't get a breath. I just couldn't breathe. I couldn't. And this was in the middle of that whole COVID mess. So, immediately they were like, "Well, we're going to put you on the COVID floor." And I said, "No, you're not. You're not putting me anywhere until we figure out, what the heck is going on here." So there was a German doctor there, and he was like, "Yeah, he's probably got, something related to an embolism of some type, otherwise known as a blood clot." So sure enough, he was right, and they wheeled me in, and I had a blood clot about right here, next to the aorta, and my oxygen level was 30 out of 100. So there just wasn't any oxygen there at all. So they wheeled me in, uh, and man, the heart stopped again. And I was kind of about halfway out there on that one. And so they called my wife and they asked her, did she know what my um, will was or any kind of afterthought about what I might want, should I die? So, yeah, that was a fabulous phone call, I'm sure. And I was ready to like choke him for that, just so you know that. Okay. And then I flatlined again. All right. So now that one was about 5 minutes, which is really long, like terrible amount of time. Went out there again. Uh, and the Holy Council I was just in the building. Boom. There was no time there that it took to be there. I was just there. And they were all waiting for me. And you know what happened? They clapped. Yeah, they were actually clapping. And I was like, do I take a bow or something? What am I doing? They said, well, here's the deal. Okay, this time we're applauding you because you've done a supreme amount of work and you've done it well and you've done it over a long period of time. And the only thing that we really want to say to you at this point is that we would like you just to moderate the hours, don't work as many hours and, be more careful of your body. And the issue is, you're just getting older, right? So you can't push past what um, your body limits are because like so many men that are my age and maybe in their 50s or so, we have a tendency to think that, oh, we're 20 years old and oh, we can do everything we used to do. And it'll be just fine. It'll be, it'll be all good. Wrong. So, that's another thing I want to say to everybody here. Um, when you get older, you got to pay attention to what you're doing. And you can't just, slam and jam 6 and 7 days a week and expect that to be okay. So basically, that's the third death experience, and pretty much what happened during. It was pretty fast, and then I came back into the body, slammed back in there. Totally unhappy experience. It took me about 2 weeks to get out of there. And I've been in pretty good shape since then. However, I cannot live any longer in any kind of altitude. So there's just not enough, oxygen to do so.
And
So basically, that's 1, 2, 3.
so now I'm curious to talk about how you became a Buddhist after seeing Jesus in 2 out of 3 death experiences.
Well, as I mentioned in all of the experiences, there was also Kuan Yin and there was also Buddha around every time. So I think with me, it's more of a choice because I find the Buddhist experience to be very limitless,
Mm.
and it doesn't have a lot of mm, hooks to it, uh, or whatever. I think Christianity is fine, and I think it has a lot of value, just not for me. So the other reason is when you are doing any kind of counseling work slash healing work, you have to remain in the middle of the road. You cannot be judgmental. You cannot have any stuff that says, oh, well, I'm going to work on this person, but not on that one. That's ridiculous. I mean, I've worked on every kind of person with every kind of issue, everything from stage 4 cancer to auto accidents to missing persons. I helped one lady find a child who was kidnapped and abducted by, a sex predator. And, they found him, by the way. They actually found him and convicted him. So, I feel really privileged to have been able to work with every kind of person. And I've worked with people from Europe, Japan, China, Russia, everywhere. My wife is a Lithuanian, by the way. So she has a whole story, obviously. And I just feel like today, in today's world, because the country is just so divided right now, I think the important message here is we need to remember what unity means. We need to understand that in unity comes strength. And division is just weakness, and we cannot afford those types of things. When people ask me a lot of questions about politics, I'm sure you can imagine, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, no. So I stay out of it. I just won't go there. I don't feel that, listen, I don't work on religions and I don't work on politics. I work on people, right? And those people have certain things in their interior selves that are the important things. Because if you think about it, once you get away from the atmosphere of this earth, what's there? Well, the universe. Does it have a judgment? No. Does it have a cause? Absolutely. What's the cause? The cause is forever. It's the only area that we know of that everything is forever, such as our spirit. People don't understand that. Your spirit is forever. You're going to keep rolling. Now, because I'm a Buddhist and this and that or whatever, I do believe in past lifetimes experiences. I'm not sure. Do you believe in that?
Past life experiences?
Yeah.
I believe that we are eternal, and where we spend eternity can be subjective.
Isn't it? And that's the point. Where we spend eternity is subjective. Yes?
Yes.
However, while we're living this life is the point. Okay. How do we live this life? Why do we live this life, what are we doing to benefit ourselves and others? And how can we raise our awareness of the things that allow us to become more? Yeah. The things that allow us to become more are the only things that actually matter. Every other thing is just temporary. Now, I heard this story about this crazy guy in Hollywood. I didn't know him, but I knew people that knew him. And he was like buried with his Ferrari. I'm like, excuse me, what's that going to do? Well, it's kind of ruining a perfectly nice car. But anyway, so that's what I'm getting at. Let's
That's
get
it.
together, people.
Yeah. And you work with people all over the world. So what you do, it works remotely? People get on Zoom with you, or how do you connect?
Well, like I was mentioning before, I'm an old school character with a wife that's not. Okay. And, she knows how to get me to join people like yourself. So right now, what's beginning to happen is what you said. So what's beginning to actually happen is I'm beginning to communicate with people on Zoom and otherwise. I used to use Skype, so I think that was the other thing. So we would talk that way. And yeah, a lot of healing work actually can happen in long distance. I don't have to see people personally. Like I mentioned in those group things that I used to do, people would just heal themselves. And I believe that everybody actually, when they come to see me, they heal themselves. They really do. Each and every one of us does have the power inside to create wellness and health. I think they do. They really do.
That says something amazing about who we truly are.
We're the healer. We really are. And incidentally, people can contact me at www.discoverwholeness.com.
When is your book expected?
I'm still learning all that. You know, that book is so complicated and there's so many things happening in it. Maybe a year out. I'm still, working on it. We just have so many projects going on.
Let me know when it does, and I'll put a link in the video description for whoever wants to go there and purchase it. And if you had one message that you wanted to get across to the viewers today, what would it be?
I think the one message really is that when you are down, okay, and you are either ill, mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually, you are the one in the driver's seat. You have the capabilities of the universal power that it takes to become so much more on every level. And I believe that if people will just tune in and stop listening to all the chatter and the media and this and that and whatever, and slow down long enough to listen to that still small voice inside, you're going to become more.
I love
You really
that.
will.
Thank you so much, Adam, for being my guest today. It was an absolute pleasure for me. It was very enlightening. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tia. And thank you for your work.
Thank you for yours. We'll come together and make this planet a better place.
Yes, ma'am. Let's do it.
Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people, and that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.